Thank you, everybody. Okay, I've been blinded here. It always feels weird when you're introduced. I'm doing this for years, but it just sounds strange when people talk about you. Okay, when Chen asked me to work today, I sort of thought, well, what am I going to speak about? I teach business owners how to build business. This is a TED conference. So I want to bring something that's a little bit more meaningful to me and to most people. Because how many people in this room own a business, by the way? Okay, great. If you really look at why you own a business, you really own that business to fulfill yourself. Now, fulfilling yourself may mean serving and helping others or giving yourself the lifestyle that matters. So one of the things that I've worked out is that we tend to do or try to live a life that's very fulfilling to ourselves. Now, before we can define what is fulfilling, we have to work out what really matters to us. Now, to preface today, I want to share a story with you. Many years ago, when it was a cold and rainy day, one of my high-achieving clients came to meet with me, and as he walked up to the office, I could see that he was visibly shaken, and he looked smaller than his normally large and confident self. So I knew there was something up, and he quickly told me that he'd been diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer and that he'd been given 6 months to live. Now, the conversation that I had after that was absolutely revealing to me. You see, he wasn't concerned about cancer. What he was most concerned about, what was at the forefront of his mind, was how he had lived his life. I remember quite clearly saying to me, Perry, he said, I feel like I've wasted my entire life chasing things that don't really matter to me. He said, I spent all my time building my business, chasing money. He said, I got addicted. I made my first million, I kept going and going and going. And for what? He said, I've got all the toys, I've got all the wealth, and I've got all the status and success, but I realise now it means nothing to me. Now, crisis often does this to people. They wake up far too late. Anyone experienced that in the room, by the way? Where crisis has woken them up to the way that they're living life? Great, thank you. Okay. So, he said to me, if I could do it differently, I would. He said, if I could live again, start from the start, he said, I'd spend far more time with my beautiful wife, doing the things that mattered to her, spending quality time with her and telling her how much I loved her. I'd also spend more time with my daughter, telling her how special she is to me, and taking her to dance class and piano lessons and supporting her into being the young woman she wants to be. I'd spend more time with my son, having fun, going on boys' own adventures, just laughing and playing, finding out about his fears and aspirations, and helping him grow into a good man. Now, this client had realised far too late that he'd spent his entire life chasing things that his ego wanted. He hadn't identified what really mattered to him and based his business and life on that. And this story has been played out numerous times in various ways with my clients. Now, I'm just going to give you a bit of background on me. For years, I worked with drug addicts, I worked with prostitutes, I worked with criminals, I've worked with traumatised SAS soldiers, I worked with all sorts of people from what they might call the shadow sides of life. I've also worked with really high net worth individuals. And if there's one thing I can share with you, there is a common human thread and story that runs through all people. Anyone notice that, by the way? If you take away the pretense, what's there? Human story. And those last two speakers, you were wonderful, by the way. You really inspired me, and today's inspired me and humbled me. So this is what today's about. It's about what really matters. Now, I first came across this sort of idea that our life path was in us when I was around 17 or 18. Now, I grew up in a society, it was post-war, post-depression. Guess what was important to people after the war and after that depression era? What? What were their values, do you think? Security. My parents, it's not their fault, it's just part of their social conditioning. And the people that I was around all talked about security, about getting a good job. No one ever asked me, Perry, what type of person are you? What path did you go down? I was just told, get a good job. And that was the society I grew up in. Anyone grow up in that society, by the way? That kind of, yeah, great. Now, I started to follow that social conditioning. And I ended up with a good career, with a mortgage. And guess what started to happen to me? I was dying inside. I was depressed. I put on a whole heap of weight. And what I noticed is that I didn't really care about what I ate. That experience sort of showed me one of the things that I learnt later on when I started working with people, that if you are not living a life that matters to you, your life spirit will die, and so will your internal motivation, and you'll end up feeling depressed. Now, no wonder we've got an epidemic of pill poppers these days, because people are living lives they don't want to live. So I was sort of caught in this, thinking that I was doing the right thing, but feeling really bad inside. So I had to take some time out and look at myself and really be honest about who I am and what I'm about. And I realised that what I really loved was nature, being outside. And to be honest, I have the heart and soul of a surfer. The only thing that really inspired me was surfing. So when everyone talks about security and 3 weeks holidays a year, I just think, make me feel suicidal. So what I did was I followed that input and I left and went and lived in Hawaii. I started to see that when I followed my own path, guess what happened to my life energy? It increased. My happiness increased. I felt vibrant and I felt healthy. So today, what I want to share with you is a little process that I use really regularly to do some of the things that I'm talking about, the speaker's been talking about today, about finding out what really matters to me. This process is really simple. Now, if the client that I shared the example about before, the gentleman with cancer, had used this process, he would have ended up building a life that really mattered to him, and dare I say, to his family. Now, we're going to start off with a premise, and the premise is it's easier to create what you want in your life. It's easy to create something worthwhile if you start off knowing what it is that matters to you. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, I'm really fortunate. I have a really beautiful relationship with my wife and children. I love them dearly. Now, the reason that I have such a wonderful relationship, or certainly one of the reasons, is that many years ago, I worked out who I wanted to be in a relationship with someone else and what was fulfilling to me in a relationship. So as a result of that, I was able to really work at creating a really good relationship with my family. So for me, connection's really important. But the thing that I want to show you is I had to start out by working that out first. Secondly, as a young person, and knowing that what I really loved was surfing and being outside, I wanted to create a business that supported that lifestyle. Now, anyone that's in business knows business traps you, doesn't it? If you're not really clear about having free time to do what you love, business itself traps you. You just end up way too busy. So again, by being deeply connected to what mattered to me and continually being connected to that, I've been able to create a business that supports that lifestyle. Now, the next premise is, if you don't define what matters to you, first, you're more likely to create something that doesn't matter to you. And this is why you'll find a lot of people in their 40s who are working jobs that they absolutely hate, or in businesses that they don't love, or in relationships that they don't like. And you ask them how they got there, and they don't really know. Now, the reason they don't know is because they've just followed the dictates of their conditioning and ended up there. Again, no wonder people are attached. There's a pill epidemic. There's a depression epidemic in Australia. Are you aware of that, by the way? Oh. Now, anyone experienced depression in here? That's a strange thing to ask. Yeah, great, thank you. Have you ever noticed that oftentimes when you're depressed, the thing that you're not doing is that you are not living a life that's meaningful to you deeply? Who's experienced that, by the way? Yeah, great, thank you. You see, when you live a life that's meaningful to you, you automatically feel fulfilled. Okay, I'm going to start with the 4-question process. Now, I use this picture here as a symbol. To do this process of identifying what's important to you, you need to treat it sacredly. You need to give yourself space so that you can ask yourself these questions and come up with answers that are meaningful to you. Because anyone notice that as they go about their daily life, they're bombarded by their own personality, by the needs and wants of children, and the demands of business? Anyone notice that? Now, if you let that noise carry on, you keep living out the same pattern, the same thing. So you've got to create space for yourself. Now, one of the things that I do is I go away about 3 or 4 times a year to natural environment, and I get right away from my everyday life to do this process. And I treat it really sincerely, and I treat it as though it is a sacred moment for me, or a sacred period in time. You can also do this process at home once a week. I do it if life is getting too full on and I notice that I'm involved in behaviours that aren't particularly helping me create what I want. I'll come back to this process. So the process works in this way. The first question is asking yourself, what is really important to me? What do I really value? What matters most to me? And what really inspires me? Now, if you look at those questions, you'll see that really they're the same question. And they're designed to take you deep within yourself into that place that knows the truth about what you are about and what you really want, deep into your value structures and your value system. Now, when you ask those questions, you end up with your own internal compass on how to live life. Now, I'm going to introduce you to a concept here. The personality structure is a program structure. So as we're growing up, we take these beliefs on, we take on these behaviours, and we take on these attitudes, and they tend to run us, and they keep repeating themselves. Anyone notice that, by the way? Hands up if you've... Yeah, great. What this questionnaire process does is it shortcuts the ego so that you are attached to what really matters to you. It bypasses the personality process. becomes your moral compass. Again, the way that I use this is, say, my relationships with my staff, with my family. I'll notice behaviour inside of my personality that I don't particularly like. And it will want to run its course. But by coming back to what's really important to me, which is the quality of my relationships, my deep desires to express love to the people in my life, my family, and my staff, I'm able to shortcut the habit patterns of my personality. So again, this process of constantly identifying what matters to you shortcuts the habitual patterns of the personality as well. Now, when I was 17 or 18, I was put into a program for violent offenders and people that were deemed threats to society. And I had a real anger problem, a real violent problem. And that's when I started to use this process. Things would happen in my outside environment, it would trigger me, I'd become very angry, aggressive. And so I didn't want to continue along that path. So what I learned to do was, again, identify what was really important to me. And I realised through asking these kind of questions that connection was really important to me. Having good relationships were important to me. So every time I observed that part of me coming up that was angry or violent, I could shortcut it by going, what do I really want here? What's really important to me? So from my perspective, this process has been incredible in helping me live a life that matters to me, and it's been incredibly helpful in helping me overcome the fears and sort of what we might call the sabotaging patterns of my own personality structure. So that's why I like to share it with people, and I really enjoyed working with you today. Thank you very much.